Have you ever been in a game of Town of Salem where somebody was so very obviously wrong about a game mechanic, ignores anybody telling them otherwise, and then basically throws the game in what was an easily preventable situation? Yeah, me too. Which is why I bring you the log of That's Not How the Game Works, misconceptions that some players believe. If somebody in your lobby is spreading these misconceptions as facts or is just uninformed, feel free to refer them to this video so we can all have better games of Town of Salem. If one player in a psychic's good vision turns out to be good, it must mean the other player is confirmed evil. This misconception comes from the way the game displays this message. It says player 1 or player 2 is good instead of player 1 and or player 2 is good. So if player 1 dies and it turns out they were jailer, we already know who the good player in the vision was, but it doesn't tell us anything about player 2's status because the vision doesn't say that only one of them can be good. Both of them could very well be town. We can only know something about player 2's status if player 1 dies and it turns out they were something like Godfather. In this case, we know that player 2 must be good because one of the players in the vision has to be good, and player 1 wasn't. If I put on scrolls, it will increase the chances of that role being in the game and help my team. The game generates a role list before you're assigned a role, and it doesn't take scrolls into account. This is the same reason why we see mafiosos more often than godfathers in Alani. The game generates the list randomly, and all the mafia happen to be random mafia, so the game promotes one of them to mafioso before they could see their original role. This also applies to Vampire Hunter. Putting on VH scrolls doesn't increase the odds of there being vampires in the game. This misconception comes from the fact that the roll wheel will still display a higher percentage when using scrolls, even if that roll isn't on the roll list it generated. In reality, scrolls only increase your chances if the roll on them is on the generated roll list. Vampire Hunter is unique, so one of the people claiming it is fake. It isn't. It's just rare to see two of them in a game because having vampires in the game is a prerequisite for even one of them spawning. You can totally have more though, 6 is the maximum amount that can be in a single game. Disguiser doesn't do that. Since Disguiser is a confusing role, I'm just going to explain how it works. Disguiser is a mafia deception role, meaning it's going to be messing with town's info. A disguiser chooses two targets, somebody to disguise and somebody to disguise them as. We're going to disguise our mafioso as the doctor. Now, if an investigator checks the mafioso, they won't show up as Vigi, Vet, Moth, Pirate, Ambusher, they'll turn up as Doc, Disc, SK, and Potion Master. They also won't show as suspicious to Sheriff because Doctor doesn't show as suspicious. If a lookout is watching the person the mafioso kills that night, they'll think the doctor visited instead of the mafioso, and any spies won't see the person the mafioso visited as visited by Mafia. Disguiser does not affect psychics or trackers. If you get a message saying you were controlled by a witch twice in Kavanalani, there's a hypnotist in the game. This one I totally understand, but it's actually a bug with psychics, where you get the you were controlled by a witch message twice, even though you were only controlled by one witch, the Coven Leader. When this bug occurs, the Coven Leader doesn't get your information like they would with other TI roles either. If you find yourself in this situation, maybe just claim that you were controlled once, unless there's evidence of an actual hypnotist in the game. If a player you've selected to duel disconnects, you should keep them as your target and pick Scimitar, because that's what the game defaults to if they don't choose an option. Well, yes, if they don't choose an option or disconnect, the game does default to sidestepping. If the player has already disconnected, you'll win the duel, but it won't count as one of the two needed to get your win. The order of Mafia visits a spy sees correlates to where the Mafia members are on the number list. I saw this one floating around on Reddit the other day. This misconception comes from the fact that in the past you could tell the Mafia order, but you found it while voting, not at night. The voting tool was patched out and is now in a random order. Spy visits are also in a random order, so there's no hidden info there aside from what's presented in the spy's feedback.